Let's talk about menus. Don't judge a book by its cover, except everybody does. So good design is good for your business. If you're doing your own menu, be really careful unless you are really good at designing. Because if your menu looks horrible, consumers will get a negative impact on the food. Remember the story I told you about the apple pie? That same story happens with your menu, hits the table. If it looks horrible, if it's beat up, if it's got junk on it, or if it's just a price list, you're going to have a problem because you're not doing a service to your restaurant. Consumers make impressions, and the first impression is the menu. It never shows up late. Well, unless your server shows up late, but it never shows up late. It never forgets to offer something if you've done it right, and it makes an impression on the consumer. It's really important to pay attention to that. You're being compared to everything else they see. Everything a consumer sees in a restaurant anywhere, you're being compared to that. Not directly. They don't say, oh, they got a better menu down the road. But they're looking at it and they're saying, kind of iffy. Make sense? And then when you write the menu, write for women. When men go to a restaurant, they already know kind of what they want. That's why they're there. But if they're there with a woman, the woman is thinking, why don't you have this, I'll have that, we'll share a little. It's an emotional experience. And then the guy's thinking, why don't you order both, take home what you don't want, I'll get what I came in here for, right? But he's thinking, well, I want to get lucky later, so I better not say that. And then he's miserable, and he winds up making a mistake anyway, and she's still angry by the time they get home. No, I'm kidding. I'm going on. But you write for women because women are much more complicated than men are. Men are just looking for a steak or whatever it is they're looking for. And women are not. Women are looking for an experience, so you write for them. Now, when we do menu analysis and redesign, it's like having a fairy godmother in your restaurant, and she walks around and she taps everyone on the top of the head and she says, you'll have this and you'll have that and you'll have this. Imagine how magical that could be. Right? Wouldn't it be great if somebody came in and you thought, this is my perfect offering, and almost everybody buys it? And a menu can do that. Let's talk about how we get there. The first thing we do is a menu matrix. I'm going to go through this very quickly, so keep up. Stars are products that have both above average profits and above average movement. When I talk about profits, this has nothing to do with food cost percentages. This is how much money goes to the bank. If it can hit that number that we're looking for of how much whole dollars get to the bank, that's the product we're looking for. Puzzles, they're called puzzles because we wonder how to sell more of them. They are above average in profitability, but they are below average in movement. We want to know why. What's going on with that product? This is where you're making most of your money. These are called cash cows. These are items that move pretty quickly, right? But you don't make a lot of money on them. This is a cheeseburger in a restaurant. That's a problem. It's not really a problem, it's why people are coming, but we need to know how can we move people off of that product without getting them upset. And then finally, these are dogs. You leave them in the ground where you found them, they're not doing anybody any good. When you sell them, you're not making much money and they don't sell very often. So this is like liver and onions at most restaurants, right? It just doesn't, it's not popular. If you have a price list in your restaurant, when you go back to your restaurant, if you've got an item name and then the number right next to the name, or you've got them all lined up with the little dots and all that stuff, just take that menu and crumple it up and throw it away, and right away go and just tuck those prices in to the paragraphs. We don't want people walking into a restaurant and thinking about money. That's not why they're there. They're there to get really good food, right? Just a real quick question. How many people have had somebody come in and say, I'll have a $14.99 and my wife, she'll have a $12.99, and oh, by the way, we'll have the $6.99 over here. Oh, and by the way, for drinks, I think we'll have a $7.99. Anybody ever have that happen? This doesn't happen, right? That's not what they're thinking. They're thinking, what's good here? And you made it about money. It's crazy. Why would you do that? And the other thing that happens with prices, we did a research study ourselves with the Greek American Restaurant Association a number of years ago. What we did is we had a lot of restaurant operators who had first had these price list menus. And what we did is we did an experiment to find out what their check average was. And we took the most expensive item on the menu and the lowest. We went 2/3 of the way to that top number, and that's the price. That was the price, the check average. Now think about that for a minute. If you've got a price list going on in your restaurant, you could do a real quick bit of research and see if that's true, right, when you get back. If you tuck all those prices in, what we noticed is those prices started to go back up again. Make sense? So we don't want to put down pressure on prices. So there's a price list example. I don't know if you can see that very well. And here is an example of it done correctly, where all the prices are tucked in. I'm not saying hide the prices. I'm just saying don't make it about price. Make sense? Oh, the other thing is don't use dollar signs. God, those things are horrible. Now, there are 4 moving parts to a restaurant menu: positioning, highlighting, anchoring, and numbers. Everybody got that? So let's talk about them. Positioning. Where something is on a menu has a huge impact on how well it's going to sell. Where you locate a product is going to have an impact on how well it sells, right? So if you've got a single view, 2/3 of the way to the top, right there, that's the hot spot. Eye's going to fall there, and it's going to fall there twice, on the way up and on the way down. Anything that gets seen twice, guess what? It sells better. We know this. This is a fact. Corner, then to the left, these. By the way, Larry Light, he was the, wherever, I think he just retired. Larry Light was the vice president of global marketing for McDonald's, and he and I were talking, and I showed him these diagrams, and he goes, I invented that. And I said, what do you mean you invented that? And he goes, I invented the little optical thing, because he was working at university at the time. He's a professor, he's a PhD. And he goes, I was a scientist. We were doing this because we were looking at how people look at products in a grocery store. He goes, I invented that thing. He goes, I never thought about using it for a menu. I'm like, isn't that great? I'm teaching this guy how to do his menu. And this is a 3-pager. If you got one of the big honking 3-pagers on your menu, how many people have one of those? Those things are beasts, aren't they? Oh my God. Center. Off to the right, off to the left. By the way, items at the top of a paragraph, the first part of a section sell, and the last part of the section sell better than something in the middle. So where do we put the cheeseburger? Put it in the middle, right? Make them go through the bacon cheeseburger because it makes you more money, or the rodeo burger or something else. Make them look for it. And then highlighting. Let's talk about that, because what highlighting is, I always show, do you know why billboards cost so much? It's because they work. Advertising works, right? And so what you're essentially doing on a menu is you're making a little billboard around certain items that we want to sell more of. We're calling attention to it. And by the way, when you do this on your menu, when you highlight something, what you want to do is make sure that all of your staff knows that that's the item you want to sell. This happened to us. We were working with a restaurant operator in Chicago called Egg Harbor Cafes. They've got about 20 of those things. And we had highlighted a bunch of things, and they called me and they said, your highlights don't work. I'm like, what do you mean they don't work? They have to work. I mean, we know they work. So I went down to a little research study. I went to a lot of the restaurants, and excuse me, I would point to something that had a highlight, and the servers would go, I wouldn't eat that. I'm like, oh, we got a problem. I highlighted a bunch of stuff and they don't like it. So you cannot overcome a server. If a server says this isn't good here, you've got a problem. Number one, because you've got a server who says that, right? That's a problem. And then 2, you're not highlighting the right things. Now let's talk about mental anchoring. A number of years ago, there was American Demographics magazine. I loved that magazine because they would ask all these really weird questions. And one of the questions they asked was, when is the one time in your life you're most likely to spend the most money at a restaurant? And it's the day you buy your house. And the thinking is, I just went $300,000 in debt. What's another $100? You're comparing a house to a meal. Now we got to thinking, could we replicate that? Could we get people to think that way? Turns out we could. That Greek American Family Restaurant Association helped us out there. We had about 50 restaurants sign up for this program. And what we did is we just took the most expensive item on their menu, put a double order on the menu for twice the amount. So if they had a steak for $20, we put the steak for $40, and we let it go. And we just said, well, now what happened? And what we had was a 30% plus increase in the most expensive item on the menu. People bought it because they had something else to compare it to. We all want to be B averages, right? We hate the guy that got an A. That's why we're in the food business, right? Otherwise, be doctors and lawyers or something else. Does that make sense to you? So you need to find things that go up, not down in value and price to the consumer. By the way, put a house on your menu. I don't care. Put a real estate thing on there. Hey, you know what? Betty over there just sold her house for $600,000. That's a nice house. By the way, what can I get you? Just for doing that, you'll actually increase. We had a really fun little restaurant in the Carolinas. We put a a meal. It was you could buy a BMW. So you got a BMW, you got a basket, and you got ribs and all this stuff, and it was like 50 grand. And not only did he get a lot of attention for doing that, but also it helped him increase the most expensive item on the menu because we got a little creative and we showed a picture of a BMW and people are like, that's weird. But what we were doing is we were manipulating them psychologically so that they would buy things that were more expensive. Now there are 2 magic numbers in your restaurant in any category on your menu. These are really important. I'm going to write these down. Number 3 and number 7, those are the 2 most magic numbers on any menu. Number 7 is extremely important. The reason is when I was working for Anchor Food Products, they did a research study with Technomic, and what they wanted to know is how many appetizers should you have on a menu. And it turns out there is a number for that. It's 7. 7 is the best number for a category. It's a bell curve. 6 sells less than 7. 7 sells less than 6. 7 is the peak. Get as close to 7 as you can for any main category on your menu. Now, a lot of people are thinking, well, I got 15. Holy crap, what do I do now? Make 2 categories. Just break them up. The other thing that we found is consumers are happier. They're happier with their order. They actually like the food better when they have fewer choices, when they have 7 choices. Now, if you're going to have a subcategory, let's say I'm going to put flatbread on my menu for an appetizer, which I do not recommend, but if you want to, go ahead. Put 3. Be creative and find 3. 3 is the other magic number. Subcategories, 3. Main categories, 7. Remember those numbers, very important. And then we talked about this, tuck the prices, right? Do price increases always equal a sales decrease? Anybody? No, yes is the answer, yes. If I take the price up, someone's going to stop buying it. That is a fact. That is a marketing fact. If I increase my sales, some people will stop buying it. However, having said that, no. You're right. No, it doesn't have to be. It depends on how you approach it. There are sweet spots on your menu that you need to look for. Now, unless you're a very expensive restaurant, like Manny's is an example, and you're selling a steak for $80, these numbers matter to you. When you take a price increase, you're essentially starting a fight with your consumer. And there are certain price points that they notice, and then there are certain price points that actually get them to change their behavior. Now, if I'm going to start an argument with my customer, I want to get paid for it, right? Because it's a hassle. If somebody comes in and says, hey, Mark, you changed your prices, my answer is, yeah, I did. I mean, you know, prices are going up. What can I tell you? I'm sorry. But what can I get you? Now we're talking. Now, if I took too much of a price increase, they're not talking to me because they're not coming, right? That I can't fix. But I can help you get the sweet spots. So let's take a look at those. These are a fact. This is HotOperator research. Under $5, $29, $49, $79, $99, and up to $4.99. Those are the only numbers that matter. If you've got $4.19 on your menu, just change it to $29. Consumers don't care. They're not going to argue any more than they already did. You're way better off. Over $5, it's $49 and $99. Now, do consumers care if it's 5 or 9? They do not. So take the 4 cents. You are in the pennies business. So make sure you get paid. Now, if I have something that's not selling quite fast enough, but it's a good product for me and I make a good buck to the bank, take it down a penny. Right? If I'm at $14, go to $13.99. It'll move quicker. It will actually speed the product up. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay, good price points there.